Hello and welcome to Kingdom of Context. I'm Sean. Thanks for joining us here today. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, guys. If you haven't already, tap the bell if you want to be notified when we go live. YouTube makes it extra difficult for you guys to know when we actually go live. So if you hit that bell, you'll be notified. Hopefully, some people say they still do and still don't get notified, but please take that little extra step to hit the bell. That way you are notified when we go live. Also, we're simultaneously streaming right now on Rumble and Kick. So if you want to follow us over there or watch us over there because you don't like YouTube, you can do that. Appreciate everyone being here. I did want to talk about the return of Christ tonight. And also, I have in the video description the call-in link if anybody wants to call in and chat with me about it, because this is a big topic that I think a lot of people need to be aware of. A lot of people shy away from eschatology, and that's unfortunate, in my opinion. So call-in link is in the video description as well as the live chat. Let me see here. Let me go over here and pin it in the live chat. And I'd love to hear from you. We've all been taught like different types of eschatology because there's so many different types of churches with different understandings, and they approach the second coming of Christ topic with a different, the way they think it's going to unfold is very different from other people. So I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to talk about it. And because it's super important to avoid the deception that is currently mounting to be revealed to us, to be put upon mankind on the earth. A grand deception that aliens are here, coming back, already with us, both, whatever, multiple types of aliens. They can help us. They're smarter than us, yada, yada, all the nonsense that's going to go with this deception. The Bible already tells us who aliens are. History tells us where they come from. Bible tells us where they come from. But if you don't understand the second coming, you could easily miss all the important qualifiers of like what's actually going to take place, how this is going to look. So I just want to start out real quick while we wait for people to call in. I'm going to start out and just reading a little bit of. Oh, before I do, go check us out with Brave Tea. Get your Brave Tea in the video description below, braveteas.com. This video is sponsored because it's our company. So it's sponsored by Brave Tea. Go check it out. We have 2 different blends. It's all organic loose leaf tea, and I think you'll love it. Go check it out in the video description below. Appreciate it, guys. Easy way to support us. All right, so check this out here this is, let me make it bigger, 2nd Ezra chapter 13. All right, we're getting some really descriptive information about Christ and the second coming. Okay. So it says, it came to pass after 7 days, I dreamed a dream by night, and lo, there arose a wind from the sea, that it moved all the waves thereof. And I beheld and looked, that man waxed strong with thousands of heaven. And when he turned his countenance to look, all the things trembled that were seen under him. And whensoever the voice went out of his mouth, all they burned that heard his voice, like as the field fails when it feels the fire. And after this I looked, and behold, there was gathered together a multitude of men out of number from the 4 winds of the heaven to subdue the man that came up out of the sea. But I beheld and looked, and he graved himself a great mountain and flew upon it. But I would have seen the region or place whereout the hill was graven, and I could not. And after this I behold, and lo, all that they which gathered together subdued him were sore afraid and did fight. As I saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand, nor held a sword, nor any instrument of war, but only I saw that he sent out of his mouth as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests. That's like a storm of fire. Hey, thank you so much, No Way But Yahweh. Appreciate the super chat. Verse 11 goes on to say, and they were all mixed together, the blast of fire, the flaming breath, the great tempest, the storm, and it fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight, and burned up every one, so that upon a sudden of an innumerable multitude nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and the smell of smoke. And when I saw this, I was afraid. So this is like your large, atom bomb type explosion in the movies, or just and everyone's just dust and ash after that. Kind of like in Marvel movies, they destroyed planets. People are being, Star Trek movies, large explosions happens, whole cities gets vaporized. That type of imagery. Verse 12 says, afterward I saw the man came down from the mountain and called upon another peaceable multitude. And there came up much people to him, whereof some were glad, some were sorry, and some of them were bound, and some brought of them that were offered. And then when I was sick through great fear, I woke up and said, You've shown your servant your wonders from the beginning and have counted me worthy that you should receive my prayer. Show me now the interpretation of this dream, for as I conceive in my understanding, woe unto them that should be left in those days, and much more woe unto them that are not left behind. For they that were not left were in heaviness. Now understand the things that are laid up in the latter days, which shall happen to them and to those that are left behind. Therefore are they come into great perils and many necessities, like as these dreams declare. Yet it's easier for him that's in danger to come into these things than to pass away as a cloud out of the world and not see the things that happen in the last days. He said to me, and he answered unto me and said, The interpretation of this vision I will show you, and I will open unto you the things that you have required. Whereas you have spoken of them that are left behind, this is the interpretation. He that shall endure the peril in that time has kept himself, that they be fallen into danger are such as have works and faith toward the Almighty. Know this, therefore, that they that which are left behind are more blessed than they that are dead. This is the meaning of the vision. Whereas you sawest a man coming up from the midst of the sea, the same is he whom God the highest has kept at a great season, which by his own self shall deliver his creature, and he shall order them that are left behind. So I'm assuming verse 26 is talking about the God the Most High has kept the man that Saul, who came and fight and destroyed everybody with a tempest of fire and smoke, is Christ, who he sent his son in a full measure of power to the earth to exact vengeance and judgment on the wicked, as Isaiah 26:21 explains as well. It's called the wrath of the Lamb. Verse 27, and whereas you also saw that out of his mouth there came a blast of wind and fire and storm, and that he held neither sword nor instrument of war, but that the rushing in of him destroyed the whole multitude that came to subdue him. This is the interpretation. Behold, the days come when the Most High will begin to deliver them that are upon the earth, and he shall come to the astonishment of them that dwell upon the earth. And one shall undertake to fight another against another, one city against another, one place against another, one people against another, and one realm against another. And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, the signs shall happen when I will show you before, and then shall my son be declared, whom you saw as a man ascending. And when all the people hear his voice, every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have against one another, and an innumerable multitude shall be gathered together, as you saw them, willing to come and to overcome him by fighting. But he shall stand upon the top of Mount Zion, and Zion shall come and shall be showed to all men, being prepared and built, like as you have saw the hill graven without hands. And this my son shall rebuke the wicked inventions of those nations, which for their wicked life are fallen into the tempest, and shall lay before them their evil thoughts, and the torments wherewith they shall begin to be tormented, which are like unto the flame. He shall destroy them without labor by the law, which is like unto me. And whereas you also saw he gathered another peaceful multitude unto him, these are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive, who he carried over the waters, so they came into another land. But they took this counsel amongst themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they did not keep in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow place of the river. For the Most High showed signs for them and held still the flood till they passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. There dwelt they there until the latter time, and now when they shall begin to come. The highest shall stay the springs of the stream again, they that may go through. Therefore saw you the multitude with peace. But those who are left behind are the people that are they that are found within my borders. Now when I destroy the multitude of nations that are gathered together, he shall defend his people that remain, and then shall he show you them great wonders. All right, so we'll stop right there for a minute. A lot to comprehend, a lot to go into, but we do have a caller I want to bring in. Justin, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Sean?
Hey, welcome, brother. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for putting on the show. I actually had a couple questions if you got time for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one is a fellowship I've been attending. We're actually going through Daniel, and we just got done with Nebuchadnezzar's statue and the gold and the silver and whatnot. And I guess I wanted your thoughts on whether or not the 10 toes that mingle with the iron and the clay, if those are the 10 toes supposed to be synonymous with the 10 kings that give their power to the first beast? And if so, like, to me, there seems to be a parallel there, but that would also mean that those 10 kings aren't on the scene yet, because it says they only come into power when he's around and only for a short time.
Yeah, and so you're in let me see here, Daniel 2, verse 42. As the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, the kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with clay, so the peoples will mix one with another, but not hold together any more than iron mixes with clay. In those days of the kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that never be destroyed, nor will it be left to other people. It will shatter all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will stand forever. So yeah, in my understanding, the end times, a part of the overarching empire of Babylon, that is, the from the authority of the dragon down through the first beast, the 10 kings give their authority to that beast for 1 hour, so that, which means all their peoples from within those countries are going to also be able to come and fight for the beast. I think it's kind of synonymous with what I just read from 2 Ezra 13, where all the people who are already fighting against each other will stop and then try to come and fight against Christ when he returns. And that's what I think is being also prophesied here with the 10 toes as iron mixed with clay, because they're not, like it says, they're not mixed with one another. They won't hold together more than iron mixes with clay. So it's a ragtag coalition, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. The thought I was having is in Revelation, it talks about those kings don't have power yet, which is confusing, because I think a lot of people usually they make the iron out to be Rome, basically, but then you've got the 10 toes, which are partly iron but also partly clay. And even in the beginning of that vision, Daniel describes that the entire vision is for all of the like up until the latter days, I think is what he says, and what is to come.
Okay. Well, in Revelation 17:12, when it talks about the 10 kings that haven't received a kingdom yet, it says, but will receive 1 hour of authority as kings along with the beast. So this is where you get into the great discussion about what's an hour. Because, like, remember we talked about the I don't know if you ever saw our Honor Kings episode where we went over the Apocalypse of Baruch in chapter, I think 27, I think 27, where it actually gives you 12 parts of the end times, and it breaks them down into like 100. It breaks them down into quadrants of time that are not synonymous with what we normally think. In the same way with like the Jubilee, right? The 7 weeks, like we don't realize that's like 7 weeks of years type thing, or a Jubilee is 7 years. So in the same way, people argue about what does this 1 hour mean? Is it literally 1 hour? Because if it's literally 1 hour, how are you going to have the authority? How are you going to have the armies of these kingdoms to be able to come together and try to fight Christ if they're not already mobilizing to cross vast distances to get to the Valley of Armageddon? So it's in perceived, just as other aspects are being explained in this, it's perceived as this time qualifier, just like in Revelation, also like 11, it talks about a times, and half a times, whereas we see in Daniel is equated to 1260 days or 3.5 years. In the same way, people believe the concept of 1 hour is not literally 1 hour, but is a span of time. But here's the thing: I've never found a book that directly tells you, okay, so here's the way to interpret or understand the 1 hour meaning. But we know what's happening within the 42 months where the beast is reigning.
Yeah,
because that's what verse 17 says, that they to yield their power and authority to the beast, because these are will receive 1 hour of authority as kings along with the beast. So they can be given that power and authority.
Sound like they don't get that until he comes up out of the pit.
Which is, he comes up out of the pit in Revelation 9, as repeated in Revelation 11. He is the beast that comes up out of the pit, and he has 42 months to reign, as Revelation 13, 7 through 10 talks about. He has 42 months to speak blasphemies against the tabernacle of heaven and to make war against the nations and against the saints.
Okay, so I guess a more direct question is with the common interpretation that the iron is Rome, I guess.
Yeah, I don't hold to that particular interpretation.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, what is that you hold to for the iron? I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like if those things are supposed to be synonymous or parallels, who is that Iron Kingdom?
I think it's the one that we see in Revelation 13. And yeah, Brandon that's a good guess. I mean, Brandon in the live chat's guessing the I would say the obvious guess. I'm not trying to be derogatory, but that's just like, is it possible that an hour is interpreted as the last 42 months? It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. There's people that have theorized that. But in Revelation 13, where it talks about the dragon who gives his you see the dragon, verse 2, the dragon gave his power, gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. And then in verse 5, the beast was given a mouth to speak arrogant and blasphemous words and authority to act for 42 months. So I don't think that this is Rome. I think that personally, I think that what are you defining by Rome, by the way? Because I know there's a lot of different interpretations on the revived Roman Empire or the existing hidden Roman Empire. So what's your understanding when you use that term?
I mean, in this context, as far as Daniel's vision, it was particularly like the Roman Empire of Yeshua's day, not like the Catholic Roman Empire or anything like that. It's just interesting that it eventually, in Daniel's vision, if it's for the entire length of time up until the end days, that empire is around until it splits into 10, but then there's this clay mixing with clay thing. But then I saw the passage in Revelation. I'm like, well, how can that be if the kings don't receive their power until the very end and only enough time to hand it over?
Mm-hmm. So in Daniel 2:40, right after in verse 39 talks about the third kingdom of bronze that rules the whole earth. And then in 2 verse 40, finally there'll be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, for iron shatters and crushes all things, and like iron that crushes all things, it will shatter and crush all the others. Rome didn't do that.
Yeah.
They tried. I mean, they struggled with various rebellions in all types of places, but they did not rule the earth. They did not crush the Chinese empires. They did not crush the Japanese empires. I don't know their ancient names, but basically like the Armenian, like they tried, but and that's why they split over time. They had lots of problems. The whole concept with Hannibal and all that, they had lots of problems. They did not rule and crush all others. So I think that's the definitive difference between the beast that comes up out of the earth in Revelation 13, who reigns for 42 months, is that he does have the power, as verse 7 says, he's permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them. This is also consistent with Daniel 7. I think it's verse, let me go to Daniel 7. Verse 23, it says, this is what he said, the fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on the earth, different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth and trample it down and crush it. And the 10 horns are 10 kings who will rise from this kingdom. And so in Revelation 13, the beast in verse 7 that's permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them was given authority over every tribe and people, tongue, and nation. And all who dwelt on the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the foundation, from the foundation of the world in the book of life. So that's why, you go further on down into 13, the second beast gets involved, making the image to the first beast, forcing people to worship. It goes throughout the earth, forcing people to worship this image or killing them. This is a part of that conquering. This is why verse 16 says the second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on the right hand or forehead. So it keeps like doubling down on the language of like all nations, all people. And that seems to be consistent with the Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 language of the fourth kingdom, the fourth beast, conquering.
So do you think
all
that,
peoples.
I guess, with that being said, do you think the Iron Kingdom is basically still yet to come? And I guess in context of the stream now, like, is it connected to the, the alien deception and panspermia concept and everything.
Yeah. That's what I think the dragon is. So the dragon in chapter 13, I'll put this on the screen real quick. And welcome, Hawk. We have Hawk join us as well. So I think that's what the dragon is in Revelation 13. It's the where'd it go? Yeah, the dragon that gave his power, right? So we know from chapter 12, the dragon is Satan, okay, the one who deceives the whole earth. He goes out to attack and destroy all the people. So we go back to Revelation 12. There's no chapters and verses in the original Greek. All right, so let's go back to, I don't know where this, sorry, I don't know. Go back to chapter 12. So the dragon, after this battle here, where he loses and he's hurled down to the earth. This is why it's woe to the earth and the sea. With the great fury, the devils come down to you, knowing he only has a short time. And I think that short time is 42 months. The dragon saw he'd been thrown down to the earth. He pursued the woman who gave birth to the man-child. So this is where he is. Then the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. We go right into chapter 13. And then it talks about the dragon giving this power to the beast. So I feel like it's introducing characters, the dragon, the first beast, and then the second beast at the bottom of 13. So this is the unholy trinity, if you will. And this group will be the iron kingdom that rules all nations, peoples, tongues, as it says here in verse 7, to conquer them. This is why it'll be wholly different than any other kingdom, because it's going to be Apollyon, like chapter 9 says. This is the first beast that comes up out of the earth. It's Apollyon. So that's going to be different than a Roman emperor and then or Alexander the Great with Greece. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. Man, it keeps going into more and more questions, but I'll step aside for a second.
Okay. Hey, welcome, Hawk. Did you have a question or comment? What's up?
Yeah, how you doing, Sean? Thank you so much
Good.
for allowing me to come on.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of little questions. One, after the fifth trumpet, the angel goes down to the abyss and opens it up, and we've called that individual that is being loosened from there, obviously Apollo or Apollyon, and Nimrod, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when he comes up, is he coming up and possessing another body, or is he going to be coming as himself? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that little point there. So
yeah. So real quick before we go into this, I just want to say thank you, SFNX Bear. You're almost finished watching the base Bible course, but you play awesome, bro. Thank you for the support. I'm glad you're enjoying the Bible course. It's awesome. That's a part of our members. And Jack, you're a new member also, so you have access to that same basic course he was just raving about. Hopefully you enjoy it too. Thank you for becoming a new member. I think that, so I've talked about this in the past, that Apollyon is a name that was not, this isn't just a name given to somebody. This was not like, Nebuchadnezzar 1 and Nebuchadnezzar 2, Ptolemy 1, 2, or 3. Like, this isn't like that. This isn't a moniker of a king that other people adopted. This was a Greek god. This was the false god. This was truly Apollo to the Greeks, and or to the Egyptians, who would have been Osiris. And so
right.
This was considered a god second hand in command to Ra or to Zeus. So, and to the Hebrews, they would view Zeus or Ra as the Satan character we just read about in Revelation 12. Okay.
Right. Correct.
So we're getting absolutely old school biblical with this mention here, right? So this is why it blows my mind, like that the church in general doesn't teach any type of history to believers, because the Bible was written in history. And if you don't know the culture around them of like what's happening. So like when John wrote this and he's using the word Apollo, or which is Apollyon is the Latin transliteration, then you're like, they knew exactly who Apollyon was. He was that locust king. And then he comes out with a swarming locust-like things prepared for battle. So they knew exactly who this is coming back on the earth. Now, what kind of body does he show back up in? Is the kind of like the technical question. This is what I believe if Satan himself doesn't, which I would believe Satan himself already has the ability for him to make some sort of congruent vessel body for Apollyon to be in. So, okay. So the reason I say that is the stories about Apollo or Osiris was that he was the one that was destined to come back on the earth in the ancient writings. And that according to the Egyptian writings, he was the one that through the Djed, that unique device that they do this like raising ceremony every year in the Egyptian royal palaces and temples. This Djed was considered to be the backbone of Osiris. That was some of the common epithets for it. Also was considered to be the wisdom of Ra. And it seemed to be basically a different version, avatar representation of the Eye of Ra, which is the wisdom of Ra. And through that quote unquote wisdom, that power, they claim it gave Ra, Osiris, which would be Apollo, it gave his mortal flesh immortal flesh. Okay. And so that's how he then was made king of the underworld and was able to, like, he's still quote unquote alive in the earth and is going to come back someday. So he was not just a mortal man anymore at a certain point, through which the power of Satan did something to him. That's within the Egyptians, writings and their declaration of the story of Osiris and Ra. Okay. To the equivalent in the Greeks would be Zeus and Apollo, or Helios to the actual Greeks. It'd be Jupiter and Apollo to the Romans. So that's where I don't know exactly what type of android-like body or fake sleeve body or biological, type of body that's been formed, but we know there's a precedent in scripture that of these chimeras. We're literally reading about chimeras in this thing, right? This is what I would put forward anyway, that we're reading about chimeras in this passage. This is not normal, right? So at first he sees out of the smoke, locusts descend on the earth. But then the locusts, as they're being described, it's like as they're descending upon the earth, it's like he's getting a better look at them as they get closer. And then it says they look like horses prepared for battle. So that means they have on a little bit of armor,
right,
with something like crowns on their heads, and their faces like the faces of men. So Apollo, to the ancient Greeks, he had a private army of centaurs, which are half man, half horse.
right.
Right. I know modern people will laugh and be like, oh, that's just Greek mythology. How dare you? Well, the Greeks, when they wrote it, didn't think it was mythology. They thought it was history.
That's right.
That's what's being described here as a centaur that's flying, has a stinger tail. That's some sort of hybrid chimera thing. That's literally the same history that we get from the Greek writings about Apollo in our Bibles as a parallel.
And I don't quite remember where I was reading it. I don't remember. Gosh, I just can't remember the book right now. But if I remember right, even those chimeras, you're looking at something like 200 million of them, correct?
Yeah, it's further on down when it talks about the army. It's believed with this number, 200 million here. It's believed that I believe, and other people believe, not everybody, that this further description here of this army that goes and persecutes mankind is this group of locust-like centaur chimera things that came up out of the pit with Apollo.
Right.
That's his enforcement arm that he comes out with.
Right. So you couple that with, let's say, the nations and their militaries as well. You got quite a lot of people sitting in Megiddo or in that valley there for that time of battle. So it's quite extraordinary, actually.
Yeah, which is what I read here in the opening here with second Ezra 13. In this battle, an innumerable multitude will be gathered together, willing to come and overcome the Son of God through fighting. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of people that's going to try. And in fact, let me do this real quick.
Well, since I got you right there on that verse on 34 there, let me ask you this. So what does that look like practically? Why are they there in Megiddo?
You dropped out on me.
Are they battling first with themselves and then the? Oh, I'm sorry. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I want to show you this real quick, if it lets me get there.
Can you hear me though, Sean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can hear you. I was just pulling this up to show you. This is the actual valley of Megiddo.
Right.
Okay, so this is a very expansive area in like approximately 200 miles north of Jerusalem.
That's
maybe
right.
maybe 150. So it's a large area. You could easily fit tens of millions of people in here to fight, and that's what it seems to be saying, is that they are coming together to fight each other, but once they get there, they direct their energies to fight Christ at his coming.
Yeah,
The fact
where I was.
they try, but they're immediately terrified, and then they try to run,
Right.
and it doesn't go well
That's
for
that's
them.
kind of where I was surmising as well. You know, here they are battling against each other, and then the firmament opens up, and it's that hour, if you will. You know,
Yeah.
the seventh trumpet. So, which actually brings me to my second question regarding that seventh trumpet. Yahweh, tells our Savior, tells Yeshua, now's the time, and he goes and he takes his army with him, his army of angels.
Yeah.
But just a moment before that, we have a group of angels that are coming down to basically chaperone us, those that are keeping his law and commandments and behaving the way we should. He's sending his angels down to gather us up in the harvest and take us to the New Jerusalem, which is not quite down yet. We got to let Yeshua do what he's got to do. My question is when do you think at resurrection we truly do have a new body?
The moment that you're coming up out of the grave, Ezekiel 37.
So then my question is,
but your new body is not like the one that you have right now. It's a spiritual body, right?
right?
So it's one that can pass through the ground, can pass through the walls. It's like an angelic style body, like Christ exemplified. So it's called a celestial body that Paul tries to explain in 1 Corinthians 15, where he says, people ask you.
I don't have my glasses on, and boy, your print is small.
People, it'll say verse 35, 1 Corinthians 15:35, but someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come?
Right.
And Paul says, you fool, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. What you sow is not the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or something else. But God gives it a body as he designed. To each a kind of seed, he gives its own body. Now, all flesh is the same. Men have one kind of flesh. Not all flesh is the same. Men have one kind of flesh, animals have another, birds another, and fish another. There are also heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. But the splendor of the heavenly bodies is of one degree, and the splendor of the earthly bodies is another. So it will be of the resurrection of the dead. What's sown as perishable will be raised imperishable. So he already told us that what is sown will not be the same body that died and was buried in the earth. It will be raised a different one, as God has designed, which is going to be raised imperishable, sown in dishonor, raised in glory, sown in weakness, raised in power, sown a natural body, raised a spiritual body. So in the spiritual body, even though Ezekiel 37 does describe it as sinews coming over the bones and flesh coming over the sinews and all that, you're still just like Christ had a touchable body, right? When he resurrected, we also will be raised with a new body that will still look the same, but we have higher capability because we're glorified. We're no longer weak. We have power. We're no longer natural. We have a spiritual body like the angels, like Christ has now. It's an eternal body that's incorruptible, imperishable.
So are we looking at it as the body would be very similar to the angels, such as spirit and water?
Yeah. Like Christ exemplified, right? When he just shows up inside the locked room in John 20.
Right.
You would have to assume one of two things. He passed through the walls, or he moved with the air, because I believe that's what he's describing in John 3:5-8, when he's talking to Nicodemus, and he says this, and he's describing the resurrection, and he says to Nicodemus, truly I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless he's born of water and spirit. Flesh is born of flesh, spirit's born of the spirit. Do not be amazed. You must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes. You hear its sound, don't know where it comes from, where it's going. So it will be with everyone born of the Spirit.
Yeah, that's
So-
actually awesome, really.
Yeah, that's how Jesus could, in Luke 24, after the walk to Emmaus, and he gets back to the disciples' house and they're breaking bread, and he just disappears right in front of them,
Right,
just like the angels do.
right.
You
Like
know,
vapor. Yeah,
yeah, like the wind.
right.
You move like the wind, because remember
So-
the wind actually is often referenced in the scriptures as the breath of God that fills the earth.
So we have a new power to us too in this new makeup that we have in this new body,
Yeah.
this new heavenly body. And so why do you suppose, here's the question, I guess. Why do you suppose that we're kept, you know, Yeshua's coming down where we're going up, and we're being kept away from his Yahweh's wrath, and we're being brought into the New Jerusalem to go in our, so to speak, our own homes or rooms or what have you, shut the door behind us and wait a little while. So why do you suppose that's happening if we have these new bodies that actually won't get harmed? I'm guessing here, won't get harmed during the time that Yeshua is coming down with his fiery angels and what have you to destroy the earth and sin. And why are we being, chaperoned up if we can fly ourselves? Right, unless we're not really being guided by hand, if you will. I mean, maybe we're just
Yeah. I
guided
mean,
as a.
sure.
you know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. For one, it's appointed to the angels that come with Christ to fight on the day of the Lord. So it's not been appointed to us to take part in that battle. There's, depends on certain texts you read, look at, but it seems to say that some of them have literally been, certain angels were literally created for this day. Like this is what they've been waiting for. This is their
Right.
time to shine. So that's their job given to them. Our blessing that's being bestowed upon us after resurrected is to receive our inheritance in the kingdom. And so then that, of course, that kingdom descends to the earth. So that starts the 1,000 years of ruling and reigning on the earth,
Right.
because the house of God descends to the earth. But it's not appointed to us to take part in that fight. Christ goes out and fights on our behalf, so to speak.
Right. I agree with that 100%. I was just curious on maybe we're not being pulled out of there because of the veracity of his wrath on the rest of the humans, because it really probably wouldn't affect us. But again, this isn't the matter. It's us actually getting up and taking our inheritance for being obedient to him is more probably the cause. I'm guessing here. Right? It sounds like.
Yeah, I have a theory that's kind of a deep cut on the actual timing of that, which could be, it's, you may like the answer, may not, it's okay. But because we're going to be made priests to rule and reign with Christ as we're promised in Revelation 20:4-6, those who take part in the first resurrection. There's, according to God's law, there's the 7 days of ordination for a priest, and it's done with a temple. It's done with the ceremony of the lobe, the thumb, the big toe being anointed. And so I think that we need that time. I don't think that like the priests of God are like in Exodus 32, the Levites that Moses kind of drew a line and said, those of you who are for me. And then the Levites stood with Moses and then took vengeance on those who rebelled with the golden calf.
Right.
In the same way, we see Levi himself, the son of Jacob, was given his priesthood for taking vengeance on Shechem. The priests of God, which angels are their own priesthood, by the way, which Christ is now over them. It is a part of their job to take vengeance on the wicked. But we just got glorified, we just got resurrected, and we haven't actually been ordained as priests yet, because there's a process for that. So I think that's why we're being taken up in our rooms for a little while, because we're going to the New Jerusalem, like I've talked about in the past, to my understanding, it'll be slowly descending out of heaven, because the whole point of Christ coming down to prepare the land for the New Jerusalem to set down on it. So the problem is the enemies on that land, and that land is tainted with thousands of years of bloodshed and unrighteousness. So that's why he has to remove the people through warfare, and if not through warfare, just through physically removing them. This is where I think it speaks of this in Matthew 13, verse 49-51. So it'll be at the end of the ages, the righteous will come and separate the wicked from the righteous, throw them into the fiery furnace. They'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the wicked that are separated from the righteous, this word separate in the Greek is a word that's kind of like cordoning off, like separating with ropes, right? So the point is, the land where the New Jerusalem is going to set down is the inheritance of the righteous, okay?
Right.
And that's why everyone from within there is being pushed out of that area, because the city's going to set down. But before the city can set down, the land itself has to be purified according to the law. That's specifically for God's incredibly holy house.
Right.
So that's
Fire
done
and water.
through fire and water, right? Which we see in Joel 3, that the whole land is going to be burned with fire. And so that's going to take some time. So the battle itself, I don't think is going to take longer than a day to actually destroy the works of the enemy and all the machinations and levels of hierarchy, the mighty man, everything mentioned in Revelation 19.
Right.
But then there's another few days of preparing the land for the city to set down. Meanwhile, we've already been taken in the New Jerusalem to be ordained as actual priests. That way, by the time we're descending with the city, Christ already has his entire priesthood of resurrected saints that are now in their proper ordained position to go and minister to the people that are survivors, which is the whole point of this particular priesthood at this time.
Right. I didn't actually take into consideration of the ordination to get into the priesthood. You know, you do the same thing with, you know, Yeshua. It took, you know, for him to be high priest, you have that time span plus, and I think by the time you calculate it all out, it's like first fruits, you know, 50 days and, you know, or something like that. It's been a while since I calculated that out, but yeah, I forgot to even think about that. You're right.
Yeah, at least that's my speculation for the timing, and why, again, mix that with we're not appointed that particular battle.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Also, hey, welcome, Jacqueline. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on. Listen, I just wanted to jump on with a thought entirely related, but I've been looking at eschatology studies deeply from a lot of different angles for about the last 7 years now. And the thing I've come away with, I have my own thoughts and my theories as to, you know, what it's going to look like as it plays out. But I honestly think for believers right now, too many people are getting lost in the details. Like I hear people talking about, and no offense to any of the gentlemen that are here right now, because I hear this everywhere. People anticipating the prize. What's it going to be like? You know, like what does our resurrected bodies look like? When do we get them? It's like, slow down. We haven't gotten there yet. What I'm concerned about, there's 3 schools of, I guess, prophetic interpretation that seem to be taking up the bulk of the mainstream. There is the futurist school, which is
Miss Jacqueline,
come back with Satan's
can
little season.
Can you hear us?
And then there's the historicist mode, which really has, yes, sir.
Can you hear us? Yeah, you're breaking up pretty bad.
Yes.
We're missing a lot of your words. Your camera's freezing up.
On. Let me kill the Bluetooth. That might have been the issue. I'm so sorry. Is that any better?
It's okay. While you do that, I'm going to address this real quick. Thank you so much for the super chat, Peanut Corn Gallery. Do I think the demon phantom ships will be in the Battle of Armageddon? Honestly, I think all those will be destroyed in Revelation 12, 7 through 10, when Satan is thrown down to the earth and all of his cohorts and his, as it says, his angels, his messengers are defeated when Michael attacks 42 months before Christ returns. So that's where I think that's going to take place. Okay. Miss Jacqueline, I had to mute you. There was a lot of static and weird noise there, so I'm going to unmute you and see. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I think what happened was my Bluetooth was on, and is this better? This should hopefully be better.
Yeah, your audio is crystal clear now. Sounds good.
Okay, it was my Bluetooth. My apologies. So yeah, the thing I wanted to just sort of toss out there is it's really fun and interesting to think about what all of this unveiling is going to look like. But I think we have to be really careful not to get ahead of ourselves, because My biggest concern right now, I think honestly we should all be concerned. First of all, be careful that we haven't counted, our prize before we have it.
Sure. Definitely.
There's a big test coming, and I honestly don't think people are prepared for it. I think I see a lot of people overly confident in their various camps. The Torah observant community, I think, feels right now like, oh, we're a lock. We're returning to the old paths, keeping the law. But I think there's a lot of just overconfidence everywhere. People have no idea what's coming, and they just assume there's going to be no problem. We're just going to skate through. We're on the right side.
What do you think is coming?
Sorry?
What do you think is coming?
A time of testing. I mean, at the very least, if we look at just a single thing, there is going to come a time where there will be an economic crisis where you're either on one team or another, and if you choose to go with the other team, you'll be in better shape. But if you stand on the right side of the fence, there's the crisis of the mark of the beast, which is essentially an expression of our allegiance. I think people are getting lost in the idea that, oh, it's fine, I didn't take the vaccine, or I'm not going to get any chip in my hand. This is a test of our allegiance. It will be an outward test. And we're going to be called to really just choose our side. Will we be willing to lay everything on the line, a full demonstration of our faith, that even when we can no longer just participate in the economy, I think people have not given that enough thought, how tough that's going to be. If tomorrow you could not participate in economic activity. I own a business. If suddenly tomorrow I couldn't participate, I've got some problems.
Yeah. We all would. Yeah. We definitely have encouraged folks on this channel to prepare yourselves in a variety of ways. Obviously, that's up to each individual in their life, if they're going to do it or not.
I think a lot of it, because again, some of us, I think, are putting a little bit too much stock into, well, I've got a piece of property in the country and I can raise my animals and I've got water catchment and backup systems and prepper skills and everything else, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I think that buys you some comfort and some time. But there's going to come a point where we really our faith is going to be tested. And the other thing I think mentally, we really have to look within ourselves to see at what cost will your obedience still stand. At what point would you cave? Like, what would it take to get you to cave? And start really going over that in your mind to really decide what it's going to take for you personally as an individual to push through what's coming. The other thing I think people should think about is, what about everybody else? What should we be doing right now to gain as many souls for the kingdom as possible? There's so much division, even in prophetic understanding, there's so much division. I feel like if people could just, just really focus on what's the bottom line. The bottom line is, it comes down to an expression of worship where you are going to literally give your all to Yahweh, or you're going to cave. And there's no gray area. So, what is it that we're saying to people, showing to people, teaching them? Even if right now you had to give a crash course to a non-believer or someone who's unfamiliar with eschatology, what would your focus be? So are we getting lost in the details something?
I think the details are just natural questions. It's, at least in my experience, the details are just natural questions that come up once you give them that crash course, right? A lot of the unbelieving world has heard the blanket evangelistic slogan that Jesus is returning. But then when you try to give them some concrete details on what that means, usually that's because they've engaged with the conversation to try to ask you, what exactly does that mean? To say that Jesus is returning is going to rule the earth and peace will be established on the earth. And there's a lot of the natural mind, anybody with, natural questions that come up, they're going to say, well, how's he going to do that when all these nations on the earth are not going to relinquish their power to one person, and they're always fighting with each other? And, you know, so this is why we have all these details in prophecy about like Christ overcoming the people that try to fight him and his coming. And you're right. The time of testing, I think it's a part of the trumpet judgments that are opened. You know, it's where it's in Revelation chapter 6. I think it's in chapter 6 where it talks about the famine, right? Where the 3 quarts of barley for a denarii. So this is basically like an entire day's living wage for one meal.
Yeah.
That means the economy's broken. Everyone's starving. Like this is a bad situation. And this is also talked about in the Apocalypse of Baruch, chapter 27, that talks about the great famine that'll happen in the last days before the coming of Christ. So yeah, it's a rough time for sure. I agree with you. And this is why I think all this together, chapter 13, all this is happening because the beast is permitted to wage war against the saints and over every tribe and people, tongue, and nation to conquer them. This is why it goes on to say, if anyone's destined to go for captivity, into captivity he'll go. If he's destined to die by the sword, he will die by the sword. It's a call of perseverance and faith of the saints. So I agree with your sentiment. This is why we feel, at least on, I don't know how much you watch our channel, but we feel like the book of Revelation is a blessing to us to
100%.
give us emotional preparedness for this. Even if you don't have physical prepper preparedness, some people don't have enough money to get set up with prepper preparedness, you know, with their life, their position in life. But even the people that do, like you could have solar power, your own water, your own flock of chickens and hens, and then your neighbor could come over and set fire to your house and shoot you. So like, even then you may be in a time of really tough decisions, because when people start starving, everything's off the table.
Right.
Yeah. It's a call for perseverance and faith of the saints. Like you're saying, how will we endure to the end? Will it be with love, or will we let our hearts go cold and join the system that promises assurance? Or will we be willing to selflessly sometimes die if needed, or do everything we can for friends and family and neighbor, even if it means sacrifice and sharing meals and all that kind of stuff? So I agree with you. Tough times are promised for believers before Christ returns.
You mind if I add to that real quick?
Sure. What's up, Justin?
It's just to ping off of what you both are saying, because a lot of those things have been kind of on my mind lately. There's like a million verses that are like entry points of this, but the one that comes to mind is Psalm 15, when it says, you know, who shall ascend into his holy hill? And it talks about the righteous man who will, you know, give to the poor and needy, and, you know, do justice and righteousness, and do good to his neighbor, right? And then you've got the parable that Yeshua talks about. I think it's like Luke 14, where he's like, you got to count the cost of what's coming, and got to count the cost of your faith, like our sister's saying. And whether or not like you're a prepper, which, like our sister said, is fine, or you're one of the people who kind of like stands back and like, oh, God's going to provide. Like both of those things are like well and good if the Lord's given you that capability and that faith. But if you don't act toward people in the loving manner that he calls us to do with that capability, then it's going to be taken away from you regardless.
I think the 7 letters are really important to us, because each and every church, you can find aspects of all of the letters in all of just the current situation with believers. You could probably, any one of us could probably read all 7 letters and find that there's aspects of any number of them that apply to us very specifically in our own lives, in our own place right now. So I think we have to be, you know, mindful that those letters are there right at the start. You know, they're not the big, you know, wild, exciting images of beasts and everything else, but, you know, this is the language that we need to pay attention to. You know, what's expected? What are the rebukes, and what are the accolades that are bestowed upon the various churches in the letters? You know, like, are we Laodicea? Are we just laying back? You know, you'll have to excuse me. Sometimes I get very choked up. It's not fear at all. I have experienced this thing sometimes where I think about perfect strangers. I don't even know them. And my heart aches. There's a woman, she's in our local grocery store, older lady. I noticed she wears knee braces. I offered her a lift one day. I found out she was walking home from work. I was like, oh my gosh. So we got to know each other a little bit, take her for rides and so on. She seems like a really nice lady. I wear my faith on my sleeve, so she knows I'm a believer. I gave her a gift of a Bible one day. Last week, I saw her in the store. She's wearing a pentagram necklace. And I was so taken aback because I had no idea. And I said, I thought surely she can't understand what that necklace means. So I pointed and I said, your necklace, what is that? Do you know what that is? And she looked at me very confidently and said, I know what it is.
Yeah, she may have been a practicing witch. They're out there for sure.
She told me she is into Wicca, and she said, didn't you ever notice when you dropped me off at my place all the things in my house? I said, honestly, I don't really look at your personal things. I just drop you off, And we were in the store where she works. I had to just kind of say, be careful. I was like, be careful. And that's all I said to her. And I wished her a good day and I left. I got out to my car. I barely know this lady. I barely know this lady. I sat down in my car and it was like my heart ached because I'm like, I know what she's headed for.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's really hard because I really do. I take certain things to heart. I don't know why I get like so. This emotion is all about just the people. I feel like if any of us are old enough to remember, if you watched it live, 9/11, let's not even go there. But I remember watching the people fall from the building, jump. And the whole time I had my mouth covered, I just kept saying, the people, the people, the people. There's people that are heading for a cliff. They don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know it. And I just feel like we should recognize the signs 1,000%. We should recognize the signs, but we should also keep focused on what is the mission, what is expected of us. I think a lot of people are trying to identify the players, like if they can just figure out who the players are, who to avoid, who to align with. It's like, because we could all be wrong in our understanding. But I think at the end of the day, what's expected of us is so important.
Do you feel like the Great Commission is still expected of you today?
1,000%.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah. That's definitely our art. To reach people with the truth, so they have a chance to a basic knowledge of God, to see the goodness of God and are drawn to repentance. Obviously, It requires them to actually be willing to repent. But yeah, that's the idea. At least how they believe, unless they're not, no one's preaching to them, right? Romans 14. So yeah, real quick, Jordan, welcome to the panel. And also, I wanted to say to that person in live chat that asked, Kurt Lawson, thank you so much for the super chat. He asked, what happens if you don't make the first resurrection? Could you please explain the second resurrection, the great white throne judgment? Yeah, I'll try to make this really quick, brother, because this could be a bigger conversation, okay? But the people that don't make the first resurrection are the survivors of the day of the Lord. You read about in Zechariah 14, Isaiah 60, 61 and 60, a whole bunch of other places, Isaiah 2. These are the nations that come to the house of God, the New Jerusalem, to learn God's law and to stand judgment before Christ in Matthew 25, 31 through 46. They'll be deemed either sheep or goats. So the goats, they're killed. The sheep, they're spared. They're going to repopulate the millennial reign, and then they'll be judged at the end of the millennial reign for the great white throne judgment, wherein there'll be another resurrection of all the righteousness, all the souls, both righteous and unrighteous, out of Sheol. That's why Sheol goes away after that time period, because then at that point, everyone's been judged in two different phases over the span of 1,000 years. That's the best quick summary I can give you right now. But if you want to type in the YouTube search bar, Kingdom in Context, Second Resurrection, I think I cover it in greater depth in a different video. So also, who is this that said this in the chat? Someone said maybe they'll have manna raining down. And yes, you will. But from what I understand, the Apocalypse of Baruch talks about manna coming back again for the survivors of the day of the Lord, not before then. So after all the cataclysmic activity leading up to the day of the Lord and happening on the day of the Lord, all the cities of the nations are destroyed. Then there's manna that falls from heaven again for these surviving peoples until they can get to the house of God, where there's free food, water, and medicine. So hopefully that's an encouragement to you as well. Jordan, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm well. How are you guys?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, good. Yeah, what's up? What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, I recently started watching your guys' channel, and so I saw you guys were live, so I was listening in, and then I saw there was an option to possibly join the chat, so here I am.
Cool. Cool. Welcome. Yeah. What are your thoughts on end times? So the title of the actual stream is Christ Coming Back. Aliens have been here. So they're not going to surprise us. They've already been here. We know what they are, but what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so I guess I'm pretty different have a different eschatology than you guys. So I'm curious as I get to go through listen to you all to hear your support and your thoughts. As far as aliens are concerned, obviously they're Nephilim children, actual fallen angels. Like I don't believe there's extraterrestrial life as far as other planets and any kind of that kind of stuff. It's what does the Bible say? We got a firmament, we're in a closed contained geocentric system.
Okay.
But I am curious on, because you guys are very hard line from what I've been hearing about the 1,000-year millennium being a physical, literal future millennium. So it's curious to me because I can't quite wrap my mind around that interpretation because I think of either preterism or futurism. And so it's curious to me that there's an agreement with futurism, but not at the same time. Well, because I guess I see a Christ. I guess I want your opinion on this, or maybe your explanation that Christ began his reign at the ascension, and then we see in Acts 2 when Stephen's stoned that Stephen confirms that he's at the right hand of the Father, beginning the reign, and then we were all with the Great Commission, made into the priesthood, and that we're reigning with him, submitting all the nations under Christ by proclaiming the gospel and conquering death. And that's so that's kind of where my perspective is. And it seems to be a very different interpretation than yours. Because I would be more of like a historicist, amillennial kind of perspective.
Yeah. I was going to say, you sound a little bit more like an amil. Yeah. So here's what I base this off of, okay? I know that's commonly taught historically, but it hasn't, there was a time and place where it began to be taught that it wasn't taught that before, okay? So the seventh trumpet, which is in Revelation 11,
right?
That means I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm saying sometimes I say stuff for the sake of the audience listening. Okay, so that means there's 6 trumpets before it. Okay, and these take place over a period of 42 months. This is when Christ reigns. This is why it says, "We give thanks to you, O Lord God Almighty, the one who is, one who was, because you've taken your great power and have begun to reign." So the nations are enraged and your wrath has come. So this is when Christ, so what you're talking about in Acts 7 or Acts 2, or even with Stephen's death in Acts 7, Christ is at the right hand of the Father in his high priest position, as Hebrews explains to us. Hebrews 8, Hebrews 5, Hebrews 2, he's at the right hand of the Father, even Hebrews 1:3. In a position, it is a position of authority. He is over the ecclesia. He's over the body of believers as high priest of the covenant, ministering as an intermediary between us and God. But as far as him being king over the nations of the earth yet, that is a specific point in time at the 7th trumpet.
Right, because what is it? 1 Corinthians says that the last enemy to be defeated is death, when it's talking at length about the subjugation of the world under Christ and that the footstool is the earth.
Yeah, well, it says, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies footstool for, meaning I'm gonna draw them under your feet. And that's what we see happening at the Battle of Armageddon. The nations that are raging, it says the nations rage and your wrath has come. So the nations that are raging to come, they actually assemble themselves literally below where Christ is going to return.
Right. I would agree with the nations gathering against Christ at his second coming. I think it'd be very hard to argue that we're looking at scripture. I guess I'm not sure how you understand, like, do you not believe that we're spiritually waging spiritual warfare with the sword, the sword which is the Holy Spirit and the Word, and then the armor of God being the Word of God, the breastplate as it dictates in Ephesians, that began with the Great Commission, the end of Daniel's 70th week, at the Ascension / kind of Pentecost 31 AD. That was the period of our commission. I don't know. I guess I see the reigning of Christ and submission of the nations as this combined idea of being brought to life, I guess, with Christ.
But how are
my to explain because I didn't prepare anything.
That's okay, man. Off the cuff is fine. How are the nations submitted to Christ if they're raging against him?
Yes, so it's not that because he talks about his kingdom is not a physical kingdom; it's the kingdom of heaven, which I know that there is a physical aspect, as you would attest. But
where does he say it's not a physical kingdom though?
You probably know the verses better than I would as far as quoting exact scripture, but there's the point at which he, whenever Christ is, I wish I could remember the passage, it'd be great, where Christ is speaking to the Pharisees and rebuking them, and they're asking him, when is the kingdom going to come? And there's a man that responds to him and says that, sorry, there's multiple passages about kingdoms. I apologize. I've got 10 passages. There's a passage where Christ says that the kingdom is not to be seen, it is not seen as a spiritual thing, that you were enter the kingdom. He
says not to be seen with signs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, because what they were asking, the context what they're asking, which is why I reprimanded them about, they can tell the signs of the weather that's coming, but they can't tell, they're oblivious to other signs of God, right? So the coming of the kingdom is going to happen like lightning flashing from the east to the west. That's why he gives the idea of the coming of the Son of Man, who comes with his kingdom, right? Do you agree that Christ comes with the kingdom?
I believe he came with the kingdom. That's why it says the preaching of the gospel, starting with John the Baptist and also Christ Jesus after the baptism, was that the kingdom is at hand. I think it's hard for me to rationalize that there's a 2,000-year gap between at hand beginning and at hand beginning.
So at hand is it
here nor there in the wilderness or in the upper rooms? Don't let them do that. To enter the kingdom, you are the believers. You enter it in the spirit, you become a spiritual member. We're sojourners in this world. We're in this world, but we're not of the world. We join. To me, it seems the first resurrection is the resurrection, like he spoke with Nicodemus. It's the baptism in the Spirit. So again, maybe I'm very spiritual with this and missing some of the physical aspects, but it seems to me that Christ was rebuking people for having fleshly minded physical ideas and not going the second step further of the spiritual nature of things. So there's the physical that kind of got you the idea, bread has leaven, which puffs it up. And then Christ is I made that so I can tell you about being puffed up in your mind, in your sin, and how it permeates.
Real quick, Jordan. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but real quick. Okay, let me ask you a couple. Can I ask you a couple qualifying questions?
Go for it.
Okay, so you believe that Christ was resurrected to a real life-giving spirit, as 1 Corinthians 15:45 says?
Correct.
Okay, do you believe he was resurrected as a life-giving spirit, but also as a real tangible body that Mary tried to cling to and Thomas touched?
Correct.
Okay, so it's a real body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then that ascended to heaven. Let's 1 second. I'm sorry. 1 second, brother. I'm going to get there, but I'm just trying to hit some foundational concepts first. So because what you're doing is you're taking the aspects of Christ literally coming to reign on the earth and saying it's all just spiritualized now within the concept of the church growing. That is what that is amillennialism. That is the teaching of amillennialism.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. The seven church ages.
So what I'm asking,
believe in as well.
Yeah. So what I'm asking you though is, if Christ was resurrected to a real physical body, but it's called a glorified body, a spiritual body now. He's called a life-giving spirit.
Right.
And he ascended to heaven, and the angels standing in Acts 1 told the disciples he will descend the same way you saw him ascend.
Right.
Okay. And you believe that the heaven is a physical firmament.
Correct.
Okay. So Hebrews 4:15, he passed through the heavens to ascend to the right hand of the Father for his position of priesthood. So he's still a physical body.
Yep.
Okay. So he's going to physically come on the earth and separate the
Mhm.
sheets from the goats in Matthew 25:31. Okay, so
Yeah.
he is going to physically come back.
Mhm.
Okay. So when do you
I'm
think?
welcoming with all those statements.
Okay. So the idea of the kingdom, there's a couple places in the Gospels where he speaks about the kingdom as being the body of believers. Okay.
Mhm.
But the majority, the bulk of what the analogies and the parables that he speaks of describing the kingdom is in the fulfillment of a literal house of God that comes down on the earth. This is why he speaks about his father's house from the prophecies of Isaiah 56 will be a house of prayer for all nations. So when he's saying that, when he's cleansing in John 2 the house and making the whips out of the ropes and cleansing out the money changing tables and everything, it says, you den with these, my father's house will be a house of prayer for all nations. He's quoting from Isaiah 56, 6 and 7, which is literally all nations will come to the house of God for prayer and offer their burnt offerings and sacrifices, as Isaiah 56, 7 says. So that is a literal promise of all nations coming. This is consistent with Zechariah 14. All nations are required to come to the house of God for a festival of tabernacles, where they then take the pots and offer their sacrifices to Yahweh. So that's a literal reality that's promised in the future, where all nations participate in the dissension of the house of God, which is called the kingdom of God. And if I may, let me show you something real quick. This is even within the language that Paul uses. He speaks about this in 2 Corinthians 5, where he says, "For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is dismantled, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands." So this is not. So the idea of over spiritualizing these terms to say that, oh, because we're believers in Christ and we're following the Great Commission and we're trying to spread the love of Christ and grow the church, but yet there's still promised, reserved in the heavens for us, is an actual house called a building that we see then descending later as the house of God, the dwelling place of the Almighty and the Lamb, called the New Jerusalem, that comes down out of the firmament, out of heaven.
Well, could I ask a quick question then?
Sure.
Do you believe that those two realities are mutually exclusive? Because that seems to be my understanding of your statements.
Mutually exclusive in what way? What do you mean?
That there could be a physical reality of all the nations being gathered together with a physical heaven coming down, physical, say the mansions or houses that are that would come down at the second coming of Christ. Physical reality could be real, and that they're the spiritual reality of that we're baptized and become citizens of the kingdom of heaven at the regeneration of our spirit, having a new spirit placed in us, of the ecclesia, as you were saying. Are those mutually exclusive? Because that's my question. Sorry. Do you believe those are mutually exclusive, those understandings, or that they can't have any sort of overlap or congruency?
Well, us being disciples of Christ and building the church and being disciples of Christ, following his ways, the commandments of God, that is expected of us as we practice in discipleship now, the reality that we will exist in when the kingdom of God comes to the earth, that all people will be practicing and required of. And at the resurrection, you'll have his laws in your heart and mind so that you'll perpetually do them. So there is an overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. It is what we're practicing for. This is why we're told to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So it's already being done in heaven. In the future, it will be done on earth. And that didn't, and his kingdom didn't show up, and his will wasn't accomplished on the earth at the resurrection or at the destruction of the temple in 70 AD or any of that stuff. So this is where, even if I don't really appeal to church fathers, but even the historical testimony from the church fathers is they say the resurrection hadn't happened yet and the kingdom's not here yet, and they're still looking for it and still growing the church at the same time. So it wasn't until the days of like Augustine and later do you start to spiritualize everything, and then they acted like heaven was not going to come to earth and that we should just grow the church on the earth, and then kept referring back to their authority of bishops of power and so kind of moved away from the idea of Christ being high priest in heaven over the ecclesia and called themselves the vicars of Christ on the earth and had the power of the church, of life and death, the keys of hell, the kingdom, like that. Like there was a kind of a change over time in church history, but the original language of the New Testament was they emphatically were discipling in anticipation to get to the house of God that's going to descend to the earth at the resurrection, after the resurrection. Does that make any sense?
That makes sense. I guess the point I was trying to bring forth was that I presently believe that we're in the tribulation, that it, like when in John and beginning of John's revelation of Jesus Christ, when he says, I'm your partner in the tribulation, that it began with the martyrdom of Stephen, that we're in a spiritual warfare with the principalities and powers, not a physical warfare, but a spiritual one. And that was, began with the ministry of John the Baptist, continues until his return. At his return, the resurrection happens. It's physical, glorified bodies. Christ comes physically. There's literal fire in the heaven. His angelic host is there. The nations are gathered up together.
Real quick. Revelation 22:9. The angel doesn't tell John, I'm your partner in the tribulation.
No. John says to the reader in Revelation 1.
Okay.
When he's referring to the reader of the book Revelation. So I apologize if I said the wrong thing there. In chapter 1, he says that I'm your partner in the tribulation.
Where do you remember that? Oh, in verse 9, I'm your brother and partner in tribulation and kingdom of perseverance there in Christ Jesus. Yeah. They were going through various persecutions in the first century up until the third century. Yeah.
Well, I would say the persecution hasn't ended. I would dare anyone to like point at a certain point in history and point to the
depends on where you are. Depends on where you are. But specifically, John and the 7 churches he's writing to, they were going through various persecutions in the first century that waxed and waned over time. Depends on which emperor was in power,
So I guess that overall point is, or I guess to say like kind of how I'm thinking was that yes, there is spiritualization of it because Christ wants us to have understanding of the Spirit. Like that's a big part of it was that people were very fleshly minded and couldn't see past the flesh to see the Spirit and the true.
What do you think is the Spirit, being spiritually minded?
Having discernment, having there's many aspects of it, but I guess that people don't have eyes to see, ears to hear. Is I guess what I'm mainly trying to enforce is that was a big idea of Christ showing us physical things and physical relationships and saying, okay, here's that. Now, if you have eyes to see and you have ears to hear, this is what I'm saying to you truly. And those that understood became his followers. Those that didn't, were like the chaff. They never repented, and they'll never be a part of his ecclesia, truly, even if they are pretend members of ecclesia. But that we're in the spiritual warfare against the principalities, nations, and powers of this world until he returns. Judgment happens. It's a one-time judgment of all creation, and then we have the eternal Sabbath. We have the eternal gathering of the ecclesia. There's no more, the wheat and the chaff have been separated. The lake of fire, so I know you would disagree with that perspective, but it seems to be
which part do you think I disagree with? I'm trying to slow you down because you're saying a whole bunch of things at once, and I just
sorry
to delineate specifically what you're talking about.
The point I disagree or think that we disagree on is that the 1,000-year millennium or period or reigning period of Christ, that it has to be only talking about the physical reign of him on earth, and that it has to be inserted after between his second coming and the final judgment. Because there's one judgment, there's one separating of the wheat and the chaff, there's one gathering of the nations, one gathering of the church, and after that, and there's one there's one new creation, not a 1,000-year Sabbath. Because
let me jump in real quick. Do you think that Revelation 20's great white throne judgment is the same judgment of Matthew 25?
Of Matthew 25, remind me of
Matthew 25 says, when the Son of Man sits on his throne on the earth and all the angels with him, he will separate. He will gather all nations to him and separate the sheep from the goats. And then the great white throne judgment is when everyone's pulled out of Sheol and judged for their deeds. And then Sheol's done away with, so that means no more people are dying to go to Sheol anymore.
Yeah.
So do you think those are two separate judgments, or do you think those are the same judgments?
I believe they're one judgment. I believe
so. This is where we disagree.
Consistent language, yes. I believe that there's one gathering, one judgment, and we could it doesn't
So
seem to make
do
a
you,
lot of
have
sense.
you,
There's a 1,000-year gap of like a judgment, and then a gap in time where people have all these wild theories. And I'm not saying you personally, I don't really know explicitly what you think, but
Mhm.
a lot of theorizing, let's just say, that there's going to be glorified people, there's going to be unglorified people during the 1,000-year millennium, that there's going to be people that could be saved, people that could fall away from Christ in his physical
Yeah,
reign,
real quick,
and
what do you think about this
then
passage?
Satan comes out. It seems not congruent.
What do you think about this passage here?
And the rest of the dead did not come back to life until the 1,000 years were complete. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God, and Christ will reign with him for 1,000 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So do you
what do
believe so you don't think that the 1,000 years is literal, but you do think that you're a priest of God right now? Is that what I heard from you?
Correct. I believe
Okay.
the first resurrection is the resurrection of every believer from death to life at the at the baptism of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's
And the
that's
second
that's not what
resurrection is the
respectfully,
resurrection.
that's not what the word resurrection means. As preached by the apostles, right? They preached baptism and regeneration of the Holy Spirit, but they also preached a literal resurrection of the body. Romans 8, Paul emphatically explains that
Mhm.
we'll share in glorification with them at the revelation of the sons of God, which is the redemption of our bodies. The
Okay.
resurrection is the redemption of our bodies. Okay, and then also that's not a definition of a priest either. So I've heard this theory too, guys, brother. I grew up in a church that said that we're providers, priests, and kings already, right?
Okay.
So sure, you can be a provider of your family and your friends. You can be king of your realm if you want to call yourself that. Go king, go. But at the same time, you're not a priest. A priest has a definition to it, and so this is where I have a struggle with certain types of interpretations that just ignore the definitions of words and apply monikers to themselves. Like a priest is a very large responsibility to Yahweh with incredible implications. This is why Christ, we wouldn't just say that Christ is a high priest as a throwaway term. In the same way, you and I are not priests because we're not ministers to God in a temple to God under a priesthood, which has all these specifications for ordination and responsibilities. And that's why we're called ambassadors.
Okay.
And that's why at this moment, though, for the 1,000 years, those who take part in the first resurrection rule and reign as priests of God because they're ministering to the survivors of the nations. It's actually the greatest opportunity. So I know if you may disagree right now, but this is my understanding of it. Okay.
Mhm.
It's the greatest evangelistic opportunity ever that's going to be set up on the earth, is that all the resurrected saints under Christ's authority are given a priesthood in which they're called ministers, just like the heavenly angels are a part of a priesthood who are ministers to those who are inheriting salvation. We then will, as resurrected saints, will step into a position of ministers under Christ's authority to the nations. That's who we rule and reign over on the earth physically. We're not doing that now. And respectfully, brother, you're not ruling and reign over anybody right now.
No, I would say Christ is.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's I mean, you would have to redefine those terms in the passage as well. So now you're redefining resurrection, priest, ruling and reigning. Like you're just redefining the entire passage for a different interpretation. And that interpretation doesn't hermeneutically line up with the definition of the terms. So this is where I would struggle with that interpretation.
Well, I guess I'd have to have you elucidate what are the condition terms for the priest, because maybe I'm
It's
deficient
to be
on that.
to be a mouthpiece of God, to actually have authority. So in the Old Testament, you would be considered a little g Elohim. You'd have to have authority over the people to make decisions, to literally bind and loose in a very real way that you can actually exact judgment according to God's ways, God's law, which is a priest cannot abide outside of God's law.
Okay.
There's that then runs absolutely against the definition of a priest if you tried to. So this is where I say this is why these words and the definitions really matter to this conversation. And so this is the greatest opportunity that God is orchestrating. So he says all the cities and nations are destroyed at the second coming because of this massive earthquake that happens.
In the rain of fire.
The house of God comes down.
Those are separated.
The nations are coming to him to be judged, and then those who are considered sheep, and he gives the qualifications of why he determined them sheep based on their actions and their hearts. Then they get to repopulate, and there would be the people that we rule and reign over and teach them, according to Isaiah 2 and Malachi 4 and many other places, will be teaching them God's law. So that's how there's peace on the earth. And that's what a priest does, is he's the law of God is on his mouth, Malachi 2:4. So this is,
So the
if
word
you
of-
are you currently teaching people God's law?
Well, I would ask you the question, because isn't that your ministry?
Well, no, my question is, like,
It's-
if you think you're a priest, are you currently teaching God's law to people?
If you mean if you would consider discipleship,
Yeah. So, but specifically, like, because that's what I was going to pull up Romans 8. That's actually the definition of walking in the Spirit, is we subject ourselves to God's law, God's ways.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, okay.
Because-
So,
well, my question is because do you think the priesthood didn't change in any way? Because whenever there was a temple system, there was the Levite tribe, like there was a certain way of things that when Christ came in and he became the high priest mediator to God the Father in heaven, there was this whole the priesthood did have a change, because there was the priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, and then there was the Melchizedekan priesthood. So
yeah, you
don't
and I are
think there's
promised to be
different
put into the Melchizedek priesthood at the
Mhm.
resurrection.
where does it say that explicitly?
The passage I just put on screen, Revelation 20. That's how we're priests to God. Also in Revelation 1.
Mhm.
Also in Revelation 5, it talks about he's made his people to be priests to God, right?
Mhm.
But you're not a priest yet. That's the point of defining the term priest and understanding the promise. Just like Jesus was not a priest while he's on the earth, according to Hebrews 8:4. It was
Mhm.
only at his resurrection, Hebrews 5:7-10, was he given his prophesied and promised priesthood. It was only upon his ascension, I should say, after his resurrection. So he even wasn't a priest on the earth. So again, you would be superseding Christ if you were a priest right now on the earth, because that he couldn't even maintain that position. It's not allotted to him. So the point of the priesthood of the Melchizedek priesthood that Christ embodies, which is a different order than the Levitical,
Mhm.
is inside the kingdom of God. That's why, have you ever read Isaiah 66?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know it by heart?
No, I don't. So please pull it up.
Yeah. Okay. So right here, when it talks about the second coming,
Mhm.
the survivors amongst the nations, okay, who are being brought
Mhm.
to the house of God, the holy mountain of Jerusalem. Okay. Some of them, I will select some of them as priests and Levites, says Yahweh.
Mhm.
So the Levitical order of Levi hasn't gone away. It's on pause because of the dispersion and judgment, but they're promised to be amongst mankind. They're promised to be a priesthood forever. That's why Hebrews 8:4 says, if Christ were on the earth, he would not be a priest.
Mhm.
So
So you think there's a cessation of the priesthood from Christ's ascension till his return?
So Christ is a high priest in the kingdom of God. That's why Hebrews 8:1-2 says he's ministering in the heavenly tabernacle above.
Mhm.
And that heavenly tabernacle with that kingdom above is going to descend to the earth, so that the kingdom of heaven is on the earth, and there'll be reinstatement of Levites to minister amongst mortal mankind. And then there's a higher level of priesthood, which is the Melchizedek amongst Christ and the glorified saints, who minister from within to without of the New Jerusalem. So in the same way, you have this has always been the pattern, by the way.
Mhm.
So the angels have always been a part of the Melchizedek priesthood. That's why in Hebrews 1:4-5, it talks about Christ being given a better name than even the angels. That word name in the Greek is the word for authority. So that's why Hebrews 1:14 caps it off with angels are ministering spirits. That's the word for a priest, ministering spirits that are sent out to those inheriting salvation. So they are their own priesthood.
Okay.
Christ is now an authority over them in a Melchizedek priesthood. The angels are in that Melchizedek priesthood. It's a priesthood not bound by Levitical genealogy.
Mhm.
Okay. So
Okay.
on the earth amongst mankind, amongst mortal mankind, the Levitical priesthood is promised to be given forever to the Levites. So there's never going to be another order other than descendants of Levi through Zadok that Yahweh uses for priests among mankind. That's why Hebrews 8:4 says, even if Christ was on the earth, he would not be a priest. So when the house of heaven descends, there's a priesthood within there that's superior in authority to all of mankind. But even
Mhm.
mankind has its own priesthood. This is in the exact same hierarchical orchestration that you see with the angel of the presence that hovered above the tents of tabernacle in the wilderness, who had authority over the Levites below them. That was a ministering priest of the angelic order, which is also in the Melchizedek order, because it's not based upon Levitical genealogy. It's based upon righteousness and everlasting life. And that one is in authority over the Levites, which is why he was sent to go along with them and guard them and guide them and also punish them when they stepped out of line. So he had authority over them. So God's whole system works through priests. That's why Christ was promised to become a high priest forever, and is and will be a high priest forever. Yes, he'll be made king also. That's the double glory he gets. But right now he's high priest and will be forever. In the future, when he actually descends to the earth to rule with an iron rod and shatter the nations like pottery, like in Psalm 2, that's when he's physically on the earth becoming king over the nations, in my opinion. Okay.
So to make sure I understood that correctly, Christ is fulfilling the Melchizedek's priesthood in the heavenly temple and heavenly sanctuary. The angels are also ministering spirits as a part of that priesthood and have been for say eternity's time.
Since creation, yeah.
Creation. So then that means that there's no earthly or human oriented or working priesthood until his second coming, with the coming of the kingdom and with the reestablishment of the Levitical priesthood.
That's why in the 3rd century, the presbyters just started calling themselves priests, brother.
Well, I completely disagree with everything about the rabbi, instructor, like what Christ rebuked them for, the Pharisees. I mean, so yeah,
but they weren't priests. The Pharisees weren't priests, though. I mean, like in the Christian church,
yes,
the Catholics, they just started calling themselves priests and ordaining themselves.
Priests, but yeah,
but they're not actually legitimate priests according to the Bible. They're just role playing.
Right. Well, especially because if you've heard anything about their have you heard of the book, the roles and dignitaries and duties of the priesthood?
Is it a part of the Catholic or Orthodox
part
Church?
Of the Catholic, yeah, it's part of the Catholic. It details what they believe that the priest, their priesthood, quotation marks, has authority over Christ and to summon him and put him in the wafer and all sorts of blasphemous things. And just it goes into detail about their how highly they think of themselves. So that's not my position of like, oh, there must like an Orthodox sort of view of priesthood. It's just how do you, I guess, understand the passage where Christ is describing that Christ will be putting the world in subjection under the feet of the Father, and as well those who are underneath Christ are also subjecting the world under his feet. Like there's
But we're not, brother. We're not subjecting the world right now. There's a huge portion of the world that hates Christ and fights against Christ right now.
I completely agree.
Christians and like he says in Matthew 25 to the goats, how you treated these, which were my brethren, is how you treated me, right? So that's why they're taken off to everlasting fire. That there's no that's still happening in the earth today. The church is not subjugating anybody. People can rebel from the church at any time and go apostate and turn from God. What's described in the millennial reign, which also it's not just mentioned in Revelation, by the way.
But that passage that I'm referencing is not mentioned explicitly towards the millennial reign. I believe it's in 1 Corinthians, but it's not 15 because that's the one that's describing, or maybe it is I think it's 1 Corinthians 15. It's all things are being subjected under God, so that he could be all in all. And so it's
I'm sorry, you're kind of misquoted. That's after after the Son accomplishes everything. I'll put it on screen for us. Then he hands it back over to the Father. Okay, so the end will come when he hands the kingdom over to the Father, after he's destroyed all dominion, authority, and power, for he must reign until he's put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death, for God has put everything under his feet. Now when he says everything is put under him, clearly it does not include the one who put everything under him. And when all things have been subjected to him, the Son himself will be made subject to him who's put all things under him, so God may be all in all. So this is not going to be, yes, in the millennial reign, Christ is going to be king over the nations, high priest over the covenant, and he's going to point us to worship the Father. This is Philippians 2:11. Every knee will bow to Christ, to the glory of the Father.
So when you say, when 24 says, then the end will come, are you interpreting that as the second coming or the end after the millennium?
the end of days, which is considered the last great day, the day of Christ's reign, which is the millennial time period, the millennial reign.
Well, so you said the day of his reign is actually the 1,000 year?
Yes. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
The kind of like
A day with the Lord is like 1,000 years. 2 Peter 5.
Yeah. So it's called the last great day. It's called the day of the Lord, and in that is not just a single day, but it also encompasses the entire reign of Christ, in which he over time vanquishes all the enemies, which is what it says. That's why at the end of the 1,000 years, Satan's let out, which is still an enemy that has to be vanquished. He tries to attack the city and the beloved encampment of the saints. He's destroyed. The lake of fire. Death itself is destroyed. The Sheol is ripped up and made no more, and therefore there is no more death anymore at all for anybody. Everyone who will be resurrected to a glorified body has been at that point. Everyone who's going to be thrown in the lake of fire will be at that point. And so then that's when it's all been, that's the end of the great day of Christ's reign, to which he'll then give everything back over to the Father, so the Father can be all in all.
So pardon me, the clarification would be helpful. So what functionally is different about the 1,000 year millennial reign versus the period of time we're in now? Is it only the establishment of a priesthood again on the earth?
Literally Christ on the earth. You can walk up to the city of God and see Christ. You'll have to go to the city of God according to Isaiah 66. That's why I brought that passage up. If you read further on down, it says, from every Sabbath to new moon, all mankind will come to worship before and bow down before Zion, which is where Christ reigns from. So
but you believe that
that's not happening right now, brother.
During the millennial reign, though, don't you? Or do you think everyone born within that millennial period is guaranteed to be a believer?
No. That's why at the end, when Satan's let back out, they can still rebel. They still have free will. Yeah. It's here. I'll go here.
Argue with that one. That could be for a different time.
Yeah, I'll go here for you. That's why in Zechariah 14 it talks about people having a choice to come worship God at tabernacles or not. And if they don't, there's an affliction for them, right? Meaning, so all the families of the earth will go to worship the King for the Feast of Tabernacles. If they don't, then no rain will fall on them, which is technically just the same discipline of the covenant we see in Leviticus 26. If you abandon the covenant of Yahweh, you may have famine due to drought in your land. So this is, again, the law of God, which is eternal, which is going to be taught to all nations and enforced, because Christ will rule with an iron rod. He's still going to be loving and merciful, but at the same time, there will be expectations. This is how there's peace on the earth. There'll be expectations of behavior. And this is one of them, that all the families of the earth, all should go up and worship at Jerusalem, which is the city of God, for tabernacles, which is once a year in the 7th month, from the 15th to the 22nd. And so this is important, that if they don't, they have the free will to not do this, and there's a consequence if they don't. So this is the mortal mankind that still is being instructed in righteousness by the priesthood that's over them, and by the resurrected glorified saints who are over them as well.
But I guess I still don't see how that...
Jordan, at this point, brother, I want to give an opportunity to some of the other people on the panel. These are great questions. I love it, brother. I do. But I only have so much time tonight. My wife's going to be blowing up my phone here in a minute because I have so much time tonight. But Gad and Seed Farmer joined us. Welcome. Want to give time for them to ask questions and say something if possible.
How are you doing, Sean? I think Gad came before me, so I'll let him talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gad, what's going on?
Hey, Sean, how you doing? Good to be back. So I'll make this succinct as I can, because it was based on our last conversation. So I'm kind of steering it back to the whole alien issue, right?
Okay.
So this was a comment that you had made. So I'm going to give my backdrop on that and then ask the question real quick. So just go back in time real quick. Let's say 120 years, Industrial Revolution, and going forward. So I'm going to make the point that these are the contractions that are referred to as labor pains in the prophecy, right?
Okay.
So steam engines.
Sorry, Gad. Can I interrupt you right quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Sean, I know you can multitask, and I know you don't know me like that. So, but I posted a link on your private chat. I just want your opinion on that video. It doesn't have any copyright strike, but if you can watch it on your side somehow while you're listening to God talking?
I won't be
You
able
know.
to do that, but I'll try to watch it after the show.
Okay. I just want to hear your opinion on. It has to do with the alien stuff. I still have other videos that people were calling, channeling aliens and stuff like that. But you can watch this one first, and I want to see what you're gonna say about it. But go ahead, God. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem. So this is something that, well, I talk to people about that I observe, so between 120, 150 years ago now, we see the Industrial Revolution starts. We've got like different things that happen that push us forward technologically. Like, in case anyone didn't know, universal parts that are the same. That was a revolutionary thing during that time. We move forward in time. We've got locomotives, steam, different things coming on board. We discover flight, and then allegedly go to the moon. But anyway,
did we discover flight?
So, but each time, and then we move into like, we'll go forward a little bit. I'm trying to be as succinct as possible.
I got you, brother.
Into the computer age, roughly 60s and 70s time frame, when it's becoming more mainstream and corporate adoption and things like that. And then, each of these points in time, there are milestones, and the milestones seem to be closer in time to the next contraction. And I'll give you a milestone that everybody can be familiar with: the launch of the iPhone. That was a milestone, that legitimately changed the technological constant, right? So you made a comment last discussion about this protracted timeline for the return, and I just find that hard to believe. In that frame, and aliens are kind of, I don't know how they fall into the mix. I see those things as manifestations of things that Enoch told us. But why do you have a protracted timeline? Because you were talking about 50 to 60 years. I find that hard to believe because of AI. I think AI is definitely a wild card, and I think that now I know this. I don't mean to sound antithetical to what God's boundaries for us, but AI could lead to de facto immortality. Maybe in a technological sense. I don't know.
I just don't see if those
that
promises
far.
are true, right? Like if those claims can be manifested, right? I know it's the claims of transhumanists, but does it mean that they can truly achieve it? Like they claim that they can genetically alter you or put a chip in you and somehow cause your body to function differently, and you could live 200, 300 years instead of just 80 or 90, right? This is the promise of transhumanists. Or they could splice your genes with an animal and you have better liver function and better enhanced sight and strength, and who knows, maybe live longer as a result. But we have yet to see any manifestation of those claims. But let's just say that they're true, right? Like they could do those things. I guess my first question would want to be, real quick, as we lead into that, do you think that AI has any dependencies?
I have to admit that when I try to boundary it in my head as a large language model, I find myself confused by, I'll be honest, some of the intuition that's there. And I'm wondering, is that perceived intuition? Because I've had, I've experimented with it like many people, but it's picked up on things that are true subtleties sometimes, even though it's hallucinating at times, or it's producing bad information. So it's just really weird. I don't know.
I've tested often, and it'll give me a wrong answer, and I'll have to be like, all right, no, that's not true. There's search, think harder, or whatever you want to do, whatever you have to do to retry again, but think harder, because I already know the answer to this and you're not giving me the right answer. And this is with available sourceable information, right? Someone's written a book about it, which obviously this language learning model is going to be sourcing that from the internet. But there is something called the D-Wave, which I'm sure you've heard of.
No, not familiar with that.
Okay, so the quantum supercomputer that they don't understand how it works.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. They claim that they don't understand how it does the computation, how it does, in a sense that it's a kind of a mystery, actually. And have you ever had a chance to watch my Investigating Babylon series?
I've seen a few clips here and there, and I know
Okay.
I've watched a few episodes. It's just been a minute.
Yeah, because I try to address it in there, and the reason I'm saying that is because the creators of D-Wave said their idea of like trying to do true quantum computing, something mysterious kind of happens, and they don't quite know exactly how it does work, and they got it to work, but they're still kind of the way it works. They're still hard to explain, or at least that's what they're telling the public. Maybe they don't want to truly release how it works. But other people suggest, oh, it's just demons speaking through it. Now, look, yes, it's possible demons clearly want to possess your body and speak through you, right? But can they speak through other things? Can they, like you see in movies, can they take over radio or TV and speak through there? Some people claim that they've seen that type of stuff and experienced that type of stuff. If they can physically manufacture or manipulate technology, since they can physically adjust the physical creation. Are you understanding what I'm talking about at this point? Where
I think
demons can interact in the physical world, and we're still trying to figure out what limitations that might have.
Well, I'm just going to drive that back to the question that I have for you is you seem to have a protracted timeline. I think we have less than a decade.
Okay.
So
that's why I asked about the AI dependencies.
With all of this in the mix, I mean, what is your reasoning? Like, you seem to have that, or do you have that?
Yeah, it's from the words of quote unquote stated, elites. They claim that they want humanity in a type of Elysium type world. Did you ever see that movie Elysium 2011, Matt Damon? Where it's
yeah, I'm familiar with like where the elites live in like a satellite city above the earth. And
so that's literally one of the Jeff Bezos, one of his talks he gave a couple years ago, where he announced that that's their plan by 2050 is to actually have O'Neill colonies that are in low Earth orbit and have people living up there.
Well, good luck going to orbit.
Well, yeah, we understand that, but they could still be in high altitude, which they call low Earth orbit. And of course, with the Vimana tech, it's very possible for them to do that. So this is where that's their stated goal for the future. And I think it's about, this is why I asked about if you've seen my Investigating Babylon series, because I'm giving you large summations of what I've detailed systematically throughout a video series. So this is where I think they're going to be reintroducing the quote unquote alien progenitor, right? This is what they've been building for a long time in the culture, the whole panspermia deception, right? That Earth was seeded by some previous humanoid type advanced intelligence, and he's going to come back, and they're going to reintroduce us to a head alien who is the mastermind, if you will, and he's benevolent, and we should learn from him, and he's not enforcing religious law on anybody. He just wants to help, and he lives in the sky. Because this is where, historically, Ra, Zeus, Satan, Brahma, whatever name he went by, he always lived in the sky. He had a piece of land in the sky that was his home.
Are you thinking that this is going to be I would say like a religiously agnostic figure? Because I find that hard to believe. I think that's why Revelation 13, the beast shows up and becomes the thing that people are forced to worship in a religious sense. But before that, it's just it's getting the world comfortable and furthering the indoctrination of the whole heliocentric space. You don't know where God is. There is no firmament. All that type of narrative with, oh, an alien did show back up, and he's just us from 4,000 years ago, and he's got all these answers, and he's amazing, and he loves us, and all that stuff. He's giving gifts to men, and all the things that the ancient gods used to do to seduce and sway men in the ancient world. There's nothing new under the sun. I'm tracking you. So what I'm trying to understand you're saying is that you're basing that on, let's say, what the elite culture is projecting their plans to be.
And
Now, do
there's
you have a time frame that you had in mind that you
that's why I say 50 to 70 years, because they're stating they want to see the world in a certain way by 2050. I don't think they'll reach that goal, so I give them a decade or two. But the point is, even if they were to truly, here comes a higher intelligence type of early sapien that they claim is our progenitor of life on the earth, and they're trying to sway people away from religious belief through an agnostic introduction of a benevolent super intelligence. And he lives in the sky, and then there's justification for, and he shared with us the technology for us to build these O'Neill colonies we've been planning, so that we can get off the earth and save the earth and stop destroying the earth with global warming. And they're going to have certain qualified, quote unquote, qualified people that will live in the Enoch colonies, versus the poors on the earth, who they try to rule over with tyranny and oppression. Are you taking off?
Taking off.
Appreciate
you guys. God bless you all. And
appreciate you, brother.
No, we'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks for jumping on. So, Gad, I'm like I said, I'm encapsulating a huge summary of things I systematically laid out in a large video series. But I'm giving you my justification for why I believe that the stated goals of the people that run the world today, mixed with my hermeneutic of it's all been done before. There's no new deceptions under the sun. The ancient world, what they're trying to state with modern language and modern depictions is literally just repackaging of what the ancient world experienced, which was the gods lived in the sky over you, and that were quote unquote benevolent to you and gave gifts to men for purposes of saving their life or advanced medicine or prophecy or determinations of fate. But ultimately, all of it was to try to get you to sway you away fundamentally from believing in the creator, the almighty creator of heaven and earth. And then that's when Revelation 12 is going to happen. Michael's going to stand up on behalf of his people, militarily kick him out of the sky, force him down to the earth, and Satan will be hurled down to the earth. And then he's got 42 months with Apollyon being let out to run havoc on the earth and attack mankind.
Okay, well, I'll just throw one last comment out there. So,
and it's okay. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not a prophet. I'm not making a prophecy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to put together pieces of like what I see, what I've researched, what they've said openly, and then put it all together according to scripture. So it's just my theory.
No, I understand that. I would say that I would see a much more compressed timeline, and I have my reasons for that. I don't want to belabor that point, but one of those I would say is that, and I don't know if you would agree with this statement or not. The reason that I see a lot of people coming to Torah is possibly, to me, because it's like a training ground. It's like preparation for something, and I'm not trying to be prideful or elitist about it, but I mean, there's not a lot of us. I mean, if you run the numbers, there might be 0.012%, I think, is the last time I tried to run numbers on that.
Well,
I literally attempted to. So
are you talking Torahs and people that specifically practice the feasts, eat dietary and practice weekly Sabbaths?
Yes.
Okay, because
as a preparation for the millennium.
Okay, by technical definition, like before I understood the importance of the feast, the dietary, and the Sabbaths, I was already keeping Torah. I was trying to do all the other commandments that apply to me as I would disciple to Jesus. So there's other Christians out there like that they're with their limited understanding, they're trying to walk with God to best they know how. They don't realize that they're like abiding in Torah, but it's all vague and nondescript in their mind, but they just think that they're following Jesus. But they are still abiding in Torah. They just don't have the fullness of it.
Right. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I mean, there are a lot of very plain, clear things that when they're presented to, in my experience, and I'm sure you've had the experience like this too, with a lot of people, they gloss over and they just look right past it. And I think there's a spirit attached to that. So that's my opinion. Course.
No, I agree with you. Some of them fight against anything to do with, they're very antinomian, they're very antagonistic. They belittle, berate. I mean, I've done debates with them. I run into them often, but the average believer who just wants to love God and love neighbor, like if you asked him, like if he wasn't in a debate about Torah and you just asked him, hey, do you think it'd be good that if your dog came across the fence and killed the neighbor's cat, that you would make recompense to your neighbor? They'd be like, yeah, that'd probably be the right thing to do. Oh, okay, you're following Torah. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I would still disagree to a point, because the type of paradigm that things fit into after you come to that understanding, it's much different to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure you get that, but I'm not trying to be elitist about it at all. I just think that that's a possibility.
Okay, interesting. Real quick, Justin, Jordan, before you go there, Justin, did you had your hand up for something?
Yeah, it's real quick. Can you check your Investigating Babylon series? Because me and my family are going through it, and I think there's a missing episode. I think it's episode 11.
Yeah, it's on Rumble. It's not on
Okay.
YouTube. YouTube removed it because of stupid reasons.
So it's only on Rumble then?
Yeah, they claimed it's medical information, but I literally just read off the CDC website.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, it's on Rumble. Yeah, what's up, Jordan?
What, it's Gad, right? The other caller. I think you're trying. I think I agree with most of what you were saying. Are you trying to say, like, because I'm also newer to, if you want to say Torah, but like following all 10 commandments, like Sabbath keeping is something within the last 2 years that the Lord brought to my attention and called me to repentance on. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Like, because before, it was a lot more general and vague, kind of like what Sean, you were saying. But then, like, all the fullness of the 10 commandments, and then after that, then it's like, oh wait, what about the feasts that I haven't been keeping and all that stuff? Is that kind of what you're saying? Kind of like the fig tree idea of the blossoming of the fig tree before the coming of Christ?
Yeah, in a sense. I try to be gracious about this view, but sometimes it's like the lawlessness that I see, and I say that, as bluntly as I can, is it's like the whole, I use the Holy Spirit and that's my conscience, but each person's Holy Spirit seems to be saying something different to them, and it's like none of it, everything's undefined and murky. And then you get so much clarity to whenever you walk in obedience, and you're told that as when you walk in obedience, you're going to receive a level of wisdom and level of understanding. And the paradigm shift is just so earth-shattering for me. It was anyway. And just to go back to your question though, is I see that as, in this compressed timeline, as we approach the end, are those of us who are doing that being prepared for that resurrection moment. So we're already practicing that. We're already moving in that direction, and kind of like in preschool, ready to go.
Cool. I appreciate it. I think I agree with you, Sean. On what Gad was talking about before and you were talking about how you believe that they're going to be kind of floating cities, kind of within the firmament, like
I believe there were in the past, according to ancient records, and according to literally Jeff Bezos, that's their goal.
Right, but what about the scripture that talks about like the rich of the earth will kind of flee under the mountains? Now, I don't know if that's like literal or not, or like where would you kind of?
Oh, they've already got deep. They've already been building their underground bunkers for decades.
Right. Well, but I guess I'm just seeing like that's downward, and you're kind of thinking that the rich are going to be up in the air. Do you think they're going to flee from the air into their bunkers with this Joshua surface when Christ comes?
No, it's 42 months before Christ comes. That's why I talk about this in my Investigating Babylon series. I highly recommend checking it out when you have time. And I talk about the Revelation 12, 7 through 10 is happening, which is also Daniel 12, verse 1, is happening 42 months before Christ returns. That's when Satan is hurled down to the earth, and he's full of fury and wrath, and he uses the first beast to attack all nations and the saints. And that's why there's a great time of tribulation for 42 months. Because before that, Satan was comfortable in the sky away from everybody. And this is literally talked about in the ancient writings going all the way back to the 18th century BC, an ancient Egyptian dynasty, where they talked about, anyway, it's a longer story. I cover that in my 42 series and more in depth. But the point is, biblically Historically, I make a strong case in the Investigating Babylon series, which I don't have time to recap everything tonight because I got to go, to show you why I come to that conclusion with all the scriptures, with the historical quotes, with everything involved, even with science. In parts 20 and 21, I go into the actual physics. How do Vimanas fly? How could there possibly be a city floating in the air in perpetuity? I go over the physics for it because it's technically not that hard. So it's actually just physics. But anyway, guys, thank you. Juan, thank you for your generosity. Awesome for super chat. Thank you, brother. And Peanut Corn Gallery, aliens been here and lizards. Yes, don't forget about the lizard people. Can't leave those guys out. I don't know about lizard guys. It's just, anyway. We haven't done it. People want me to do a show on lizards, but I don't know about lizard people. Anyway, guys, I got to go tonight. Thank you so much, Seed Farmer. I'll check out that video later tonight. Right. Thank you guys so much for jumping on the panel. But I got to go do family stuff. So you guys be blessed. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here in the chat. You guys are awesome. If you liked our conversation, share it. Hit a thumbs up, like it, drop your comments below. Let me know what you thought. If you like our ministry, if you like what we're doing, if you think we're bringing value with our research, our information, with everything that we're doing, consider walking alongside of us and support our Patreon, the video description below, or any of the other ways that you see down there to support us. Just helps us keep going, helps us increase our production and what we're doing. I've been praying for a long time that we would grow to a place where I could afford to pay someone to help me with production for streams and for setting up, interviews and things like that. Because it's not like I do everything right now, right? I'm like doing all the research for the shows. I try to make the graphics for the shows, the thumbnails. All this stuff takes time. Okay, so I've been praying for a long time that we could afford to have an assistant to help me with some of this stuff. So if you guys like what we're doing, you think it brings value to people and to yourself, you think you're being fed by this and the Father puts it on your heart to support us, there's ways to do that in the video description below. We appreciate everyone that already supports us. You guys are amazing. Really are a blessing to us to be able to do this. And so thank you. Heartfelt. Thank you. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Slow down and return to what truly restores. Our Sabbath Rest blend was created for all to enjoy, a comforting blend of organic herbs traditionally used to calm restlessness and invite deep, peaceful rest, perfect before bed or while observing the day of rest with the Most High. The Tree of Life blend draws from organic natural herbs, thoughtfully crafted to support balance and renewal, best enjoyed a few times each week with a touch of organic raw honey. 2 blends that are crafted with care for a moment of peace in every cup.